When I was younger, I dreamt of games achieving true immersion. I was obsessed with the idea of games imitating the real world, creating a sandbox of possibilities without the consequences of risking life and limb. These games didn't really exist in the 90s and early 2000s, aside from a few niche titles like Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six or the original Operation Flashpoint. But these games were PC titles, and our family computer couldn't run much beyond StarCraft. I didn't get an actual gaming PC until around 2011, so I was limited to playing games on console. Amazing video games like Halo Combat Evolved or Battlefield 2 Modern Combat offered captivating and dynamic gameplay, but often left me wanting with my desire for more complex, simulation-like mechanics. In the late 2000s, a game would attempt to implement some of the features I had dreamt about. That game was Far Cry 2. Far Cry 2 fascinated me. Released in 2008, it's one of my favorite examples of diegetic design. The game attempted to get rid of nearly all conventional HUD elements in favor of physical, in-world representation of information, a choice that fundamentally shaped its gameplay loop and reinforced its themes of vulnerability and struggle, placing you directly in the shoes of one of 9 different mercenaries. My favorite of these features was the game's navigation system. Instead of needing to pause the game to look at the map, the player character physically pulled out a paper map in real time. The game world does not stop, bullets continue to fly, patrols continue to advance, making you completely vulnerable while consulting your map. This transformed the mundane act of checking your location into a deliberate decision. You had to consciously seek out a moment of relative safety before navigating, keeping you immersed in an extremely hostile world. This philosophy extended to other elements of the game. The game's HUD was very minimal, with crucial information like health and ammunition appearing contextually. To heal, the player would have to use healing syringes unless you became critically injured. Below a certain threshold, your character had to engage in some brutal, context-sensitive animations, such as digging a bullet out of your arm with a knife or snapping your dislocated fingers back into place. Another detail that I loved was the weapon degradation. Weapons would degrade gradually, becoming dirty and scratched over time before eventually jamming, forcing you to pay attention to your equipment's physical state. These diegetic systems worked together to ground the player firmly within the game's harsh African setting, making every interaction a deliberate choice. While Far Cry 2 uses diegetic design to create a sense of realism, the 2008 sci-fi horror classic Dead Space employs it to amplify tension and fear. The game's design philosophy was centered around achieving total player immersion by removing any traditional interface elements that might break the spell of its terrifying atmosphere. The cornerstone of this approach was the Resource Integration Gear, or RIG, a suit worn by protagonist Isaac Clarke. The player's health and stasis energy are displayed as glowing meters integrated directly into the spine of Isaac's suit. This is a brilliant piece of game design, both deeply aesthetically pleasing and incredibly functional. Because the health meter is on the character's back, it was easy to see just how close to death you are without needing to glance at the edge of the screen. The game's other UI elements are also presented as in-world holographic projections that emanate from Isaac's suit, appearing in the 3D space in front of him. The inventory, mission objectives, video calls all exist within the game world, and crucially, accessing them does not pause the action. Managing an inventory or viewing the map while the necromorph bears down on you is a frantic, terrifying experience that maintains a constant state of tension. This design ensures that the player can never be sure that they are in complete safety. The threat is persistent and inescapable, masterfully keeping the player immersed and grounded within the desolate halls of the USG Ishimura. Beyond diegetic presentation, a powerful driver of immersion is the implementation of high-stakes systems where player actions have significant and often permanent consequences. These design decisions tap into the psychological principle of loss aversion, where the fear of losing something of value is a far more potent motivator than the prospect of a potential gain. By making failure costly, these games create a persistent baseline of tension that elevates the emotional weight of every decision, forcing players to invest deeply in their actions and their character's survival. One of my favorite examples of this concept is Escape from Tarkov. As far as I'm concerned, Tarkov is the pinnacle of the extraction shooter genre, built entirely around the high-risk, high-reward gameplay loop that instills a unique form of anxiety known as gear fear. The core mechanic is not to win a match, but to enter a raid, complete tasks, secure valuable loot, and find and extract. The consequence of failure is severe. Death results in the loss of all your equipment, weapons, and armor brought into raid. This almost roguelike approach to death and gear fundamentally alters the player's thought process, transforming cautious exploration into a nerve-wracking gamble and every firefight into a desperate, high-stakes battle. This tension is compounded by the game's health and medical system. The player character has a total of 440 HP, distributed around 7 distinct body parts: head, thorax, stomach, and all 4 limbs. Damage is localized and carries specific debilitating consequences. A blacked out leg from taking too much damage will prevent the player from running, forcing them to limp slowly towards extraction. A destroyed arm severely impacts aiming stability and weapon handling. A blacked out stomach leads to rapid dehydration and starvation. The system creates a variety of failure states far more nuanced than simple binary life and death. A player can survive a firefight only to find themselves with a heavy bleed that requires a tourniquet, or a fracture that needs a splint, or a blacked out limb that can only be restored with a surgical kit. This forces players into a desperate mid-combat triage, managing not just their survival, but their continued combat effectiveness. The need to use the correct medical item for a specific injury, often under fire, adds a layer of complex decision-making that is rare in most other video games. But where Tarkov focuses on the loss of gear, Project Zomboid centers around the permanent loss of your character. Every time you start a new game, you're greeted with a grim reminder. This is how you died. The game's core philosophy is that survival is a temporary state, and death is inevitable. A single bite from a zombie is a guaranteed death sentence. This permadeath mechanic makes every encounter with the undead a truly terrifying prospect. Becoming complacent can erase dozens of hours of progress. The game's immersion is built on the foundation of brutal and meticulous realism. It simulates the vast array of survival needs beyond simple hunger and thirst, including fatigue, illness, boredom, depression, and stress, all of which have tangible gameplay side effects. The world is governed by complex systems. Food spoils over time, electricity and water eventually shut down, and the changing seasons comes with new challenges like the freezing cold of winter. The level of detail is staggering. Players must manage the nutritional contents of their meals, wash the blood off their clothes and bury bodies to avoid sickness, and manage your character's mental state with distractions from the new reality, or perhaps with the aid of drugs and alcohol. This friction transforms mundane activities into immersive challenges. The need to find a can opener to access some canned food or to boil water to make it safe to drink might sound like tedious chores that detract from the fun, but for me and many others, they are the game. This friction forces players to think and plan like a real survivor, where every decision, no matter how small, has a potential consequence. Project Zomboid is the ultimate zombie survival simulator. My childhood dream of truly immersive games has in many ways been realized, though perhaps not always in the ways I once imagined. But something that a lot of my favorite games have in common is their ability to ground me within their worlds by using mechanics that emulate real life. I'm not saying that these types of games are better than more traditional titles. A recent favorite of mine is a musical RPG from the indie dev Ritual Studios called Fretless. The music is absolutely incredible and the art is very charming. I just love video games, but some of my favorites just happen to lean into more complex and immersive mechanics.